Hi, ladies. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to this webinar. If you're here today, it probably means that you have an interest in traveling, but maybe you hesitate to embark on your first solo adventure. Maybe you have like a travel project, but you lack the partner to go with. Maybe it's because you always wanted to travel alone, but you feel a little anxious about it. There's so many reasons to travel alone, but it can be a little scary. So we have two goals for today. First of all, maybe give you that little confidence that you need to embark on your first trip, and also give you the tools that you need to do it in a safe and fun way. So my name is Arianne. I am the coordinator of the Youth Travel Foundation. It's a Canadian charity promoting travel as an educational tool for teenagers and young adults. So we provide resources such as this webinar. We have travel guides on our website, all kinds of things. And we also offer travel grants. So after the session, make sure to check our website to see if you could get funding for your next trip. I want to come up clear with something before we start. I've traveled a lot, but to be super honest with you, I am the most fearful person that I know. I have a general anxiety disorder. I see potential threats everywhere I look. And it took me a long time, a lot of patience, and a lot of trials before I could finally have the confidence to be the adventurer that I always wanted to be. But with time, it's totally possible to calm that little panic voice inside your head and just make your travel dreams come true. So I hope today that I'll be able to help you make that transition. And to do that, I have the pleasure to have with me today our guest speaker, Ashlyn George. She is the author of the blog, The Lost Girl's Guide to Finding the World. Hi, Ashlyn.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. You?
Good. Thank you for having me in today. I love talking about solo female travel. So this is going to be a great next hour.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your blog and how you came into the travel world?
Absolutely. So I'm based out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. And I went through 5 years of university, and I'm supposed to be a high school biology teacher. Once I finished university, I didn't quite feel ready to jump into that work world. And so my philosophy was, if I could spend 5 years learning in an institution, I could spend 5 years learning in the world. So I decided to plan a rotating 5-year trip around the world.
Oh, Ashlyn disappeared. We lost Ashlyn. She's probably going to log back on any minute, but I'm going to seize this opportunity while she is gone to introduce our moderator for the session, Marie-Gil. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. You?
I'm good. So you are a marketing coordinator at HI Canada, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about HI Canada?
Yes, so HI Canada stands for Hostling International Canada. So we're a not-for-profit organization, part of the world's largest hostel network. So worldwide, there are 3,300 HI hostels in 64 countries. And in Canada, we have 54 from coast to coast. And our mission is to build a community of conscious travelers who share a greater understanding of people, places, and culture.
Nice. And you've traveled quite a lot as well before coming to work with HI, right?
Oh, yes, it's a passion and one of the reasons why I chose to come work for a hostel network.
And you traveled solo?
Yes, I do. I find a lot of advantages to traveling solo. So I think it brings you a lot, personally.
Nice. So can you explain how this session is going to work? If people want to interact, if they have questions, you're going to be monitoring this webinar room, but also the social media. So what can they do if they want to interact with us?
Yes, so there's a little chat box at the bottom right of your screen. So you can write all your questions there during the webinar. And at the end, during the Q&A sessions, we're going to answer them. And as well, if you're following us on Facebook, you can just write your question or comments in the discussion section. And we're going to address these ones as well at the end.
Okay, well, while Ashlyn is trying to reconnect, I'm just going to go on and start the presentation. So first of all, let's talk about the most common sources of worry. So here are the main ones. So the first I would say are the ones communicated by the media, which group a lot of them. But in the media, we often hear about the horror stories. It's a lot of sensationalism. So we often hear stories of, not often, but I would say every now and then there are stories of a young female traveler who are kidnapped or raped or disappear and stuff like that. But know that this is like a really, really small percentage of the actual women traveling community. We hear about these stories, but these stories actually happen even in your hometown. Wherever you live, there will be a potential risk. So we must not just let ourselves be discouraged by what we hear in the media. I would also include that, based on my personal experience, the fears communicated by your friends and family. I know that my family is also like on the little anxious side. So whenever I come with a travel project, my family is gonna like come up with statistics or concerns, and they're gonna really communicate their fears to me. So it's really common to be influenced by the media, your family, your friends. But this is totally something you can overcome. There's also the fear of feeling lonely. So you travel alone, you think that you're not going to make friends, you're going to miss out on opportunities, maybe because, oh, is it weird to go alone to the restaurant or something like that. But when you travel alone, you're actually very rarely alone. And this is what we're going to discuss later. You're actually more approachable when you're alone than when you travel with a friend or a partner. Another fear, to be an easy prey for the predators. Once again, this can happen anywhere. Of course, if you're in a foreign country, you might be a little more vulnerable because you are not necessarily catching on all the cultural reference. But if you're cautious, if you're being careful, you're not necessarily going to be an easier prey than you would be here. The fear of becoming ill, so being sick abroad and being alone, not knowing what to do, not having someone to like care after you, is kind of a legitimate one also. But once again, there are tips and certain things that you can do to stay healthy. We also have a webinar on our website about that if you want some resources on how to stay healthy while abroad. Feeling homesick. This is something that is probably going to happen at some point, whether you're alone or whether you're with someone, depending on how long you're gone for. If you go for a week, of course, it's going to, like, the cultural shock is not going to be as intense as if you're gone for several months or several years. But once again, know that whether you're alone or with someone, this is going to happen at some point. And we are super blessed with the technology nowadays when it works properly. But you can keep in touch with your friends and family. And there are ways also to overcome homesickness, which we're also going to discuss later on in this webinar. And the last source of worry that is the most encountered is the language barrier, which also is kind of a legitimate one because it can be stressful and overwhelming to be in an environment where you don't speak the language. But if you prepare ahead or if you choose a destination accordingly to the languages that you already speak, this is something that can be dealt with. Ashlyn, are you back?
It looks like I'm back. I'm sorry.
Okay. No worries, no worries. I'm glad you're here. So let's go with the interview section of this webinar. And hopefully you're going to be here for the whole time. So we kind of lost a little bit of what you said because you disappeared, but basically you have several years of traveling experience. So you're going to be very valuable resources for us today. First question, quite simple. Is it safe to travel alone as a woman?
Absolutely, not a doubt. And I am proof that it is safe to travel alone as a woman. I think there's definitely things that you can do to make sure you're being as safe as possible, but I would never tell somebody not to go traveling just because they're a woman.
So are there specific destinations that are more like solo traveler friendly, or is it just a matter of adapting to the situation?
I would definitely say that there are places that are a little bit more friendly for both solo travel and solo female travel. I think one of the most important things I did when I started out traveling was I picked locations that were similar to home. So they might be English speaking countries because that's the only language that I can speak, or they might be similar cultures to back home. So if you go travel in these other places, you're still uncomfortable because it is still a little bit different. But at the end of the day, I know as a Canadian, if I'm in Australia or New Zealand or even in England, I'm still going to fit in. You won't be able to tell that I'm Canadian until you hear my accent. So it's a good way to kind of wet your feet in the world of travel before taking on destinations where it might be a lot more different from how you grew up as well. So I always recommend starting with places that are similar to your own home if you're nervous about it.
But eventually, with time and experience, it's also feasible to go to places that are maybe more not necessarily shocking, but exotic or different, let's say.
Absolutely. And even, as I progressed through my travel journey, I would go to more and more off the beaten path or challenging travel destinations. I know Madagascar is a country I spent about a month in, and it's one of my favorite countries that I've been to, but it was a little bit more challenging just in terms of geographically getting there. There was a lot more flights and a lot more expense to getting there. But then as a woman, I felt that I was noticed a little bit more. I've got long blonde hair, so I might try and cover up my head a little bit, or there was language barriers. Unfortunately, although I'm Canadian, I don't speak French, and I don't speak Malagasy either, so you had to overcome some of those. So it was a bit more challenging, but because of my prior traveling experience, I felt that I was more capable of managing those challenges.
Are there travel accessories that help you feel safe or comfortable when you're abroad?
I think there's two pillars to travel accessories that make you feel safe. So one of them might just be some things that make you feel comfortable that you have at home. So maybe you have a favorite hoodie that you carry with you, and it's that little piece of comfort. Or, I've seen people who have traveled with little tiny teddy bears or mementos or trinkets from home. And then that's one side that makes you feel more personally comfortable and safe. And then there's travel apps that you can use as well. So you were mentioning the language barrier before, but I always recommend Google Translate to help you translate of those language barriers. So there's a few different options that can make you feel more personally safe, and then just technology wise. And I always recommend whatever country you're from, going to your government's website and checking out the travel advisories they have for the destination that you're going to as well. It's a great source of information to start off with.
Absolutely. Did you ever feel lonely during a trip?
To be honest, for the most part, I haven't really ever felt lonely. That was one of my biggest concerns, but my dad gave me one of the greatest and most simple pieces of advice, because I would go out and I would travel for 6 months at a time, and I'd be alone by myself, have no support system, and you might be 14,000 kilometers away from home. And he said, you know what, Ashlyn, if you go out there and you're sad or you're lonely or you don't want to be there, you can always come back home. You don't have to stay there for the full 2 weeks or the 6 months or the 2 years, whatever it is you committed. You can always come back home. And just keeping that in the back of my mind was kind of that comfort to keep me out there. And so I haven't felt lonely either, because I've always had a goal and a purpose while I'm traveling. It's been on trips where I didn't always know, what is my purpose here? Why am I traveling here right now? That I might have felt a little bit more of that loneliness. But if you have a reason and a purpose and a goal for why you're in that destination, I think that also helps combat a little bit of that loneliness.
And do you use the same trick to beat homesickness, or like the urge to want to go back home? Because it surely happened at some point in your years of traveling that you just wanted to drop it all and go back.
The most beautiful thing about technology, although sometimes it doesn't work perfect, is that you can stay more connected to family and friends now more than ever. So I have spent 6 Christmases away from home. And as a Canadian, Christmas is a really important family-centered holiday. And it's been hard to be away. But because of WhatsApp, because of Skype, I've actually been able to watch my nephews meet Santa Claus and open some presents because of apps like that. So I found that's really made me feel more connected to home when you feel that distance of, spending Christmas in Vietnam when your entire family is back in Canada. And I think that's the most powerful way that you can beat that homesickness and that loneliness is reconnecting with your family, reconnecting with friends, planning Skype hangouts or dates with partners or whoever it might be, just to make you feel, a little less homesick.
Yes, and not giving up, reminding yourself why you're there, why you embarked on this journey, giving yourself time. When you travel, there are lots of ups and downs. It's not always exciting. It's not always sad neither. So just acknowledging that you're going through these emotions and it's going to go away eventually. And yes, you can always go back home. And if you find yourself in a very uncomfortable situation and you want to go back home, it's totally fine. You're allowed to do that. But sometimes just holding on for a couple more days, it's just going to give you that extra time and space that you needed to feel better and move on with the rest of your trip.
Exactly. And that's what I always say too, is just give yourself some space. If you feel lonely and homesick, don't react immediately. Take some time, talk to family members, think through your feelings and why you're feeling that way. And don't rush into any major actions because you don't want to end up back at home and then wish you were still back out traveling. I always think there's ways around to deal with what you're feeling when you're on the road. And you're right, there's lots of ups and downs. It's exhausting, it's tiring every day. You're encountering so many new and different experiences, and it can be a lot to take in. So it's okay to take down days when traveling too. You don't always have to feel that pressure to go and see and do. Sometimes you just need to hang out in your hotel or your hostel and maybe watch some Netflix.
Yes, absolutely. But for the moments that you do want to go out and make friends, how do you meet people when you're traveling? Either it being how do you meet friends or romantic partners or just people that you can team up with to go on an adventure? How do you make friends?
So I'm very fortunate in that I am an extrovert. So sometimes it's a little bit easier for me to just randomly walk up to people, say hi. And I realize it's not always that easy for other people. And even sometimes I'll be somewhere and I'll feel really alone and I just want to meet somebody to hang out with. And I found one of the most helpful things to meeting somebody is just to compliment somebody else. So if you're out traveling and you see another female solo traveler and you really like her bag, tell her that. Say, hey, I really like your bag. Where did you get it? And you can strike up a conversation that way. And you can do that both in hostels, which are usually designed to be able to meet people pretty easily, or you can still do that if maybe you're out in a museum and you see somebody else who's also a traveler. And you can start that conversation anywhere. It doesn't have to be in that safety of that hostel. But I also try to put myself in situations where there will be a group setting. So I might take a walking tour of a city, knowing that there will be other tourists on that tour that I can chat with and get to know. And it doesn't always work out, but more often than not, I have found other people to travel with. And that's usually the highlight of my trip, is when I get to travel with other individuals.
Yes, meeting new people on the road is so much fun. And as I mentioned earlier, I found, based on my personal experience, that we are actually more approachable when we're alone. When you are traveling with a friend or with a boyfriend or anything, people are maybe sometimes less inclined to come and talk to you. But when you're alone, it's like there is this traveler solidarity, and people will come up to you and talk to you and engage the conversation. So sometimes you don't even have to make the first step. People will come to you.
I've always found that. I've been sitting in a restaurant eating by myself, or maybe I'm sitting in a park enjoying nature and maybe reading a book, and people will always seem to come up to me just to say hi, ask what I'm up to. And I still find there is a bit of a stigma stigma about women traveling solo. And oftentimes I get comments like, oh, you're so brave, or I can't believe you're out here alone by yourself. And then that's a great opportunity to engage in that conversation and talk with people too, sharing like why it's not actually that crazy for a woman to be out traveling solo and why you're doing it and the reasons that you're out there. And then it's surprising where those conversations and friendships can lead to.
Definitely. And it's not only true for the travelers community. Sometimes it's local people who will come and engage with you because they can see that you're not from here, and they will either want to offer some help, or they will seize an opportunity to engage with a person from a different culture. So even outside of the comfort of your hostel, as you were saying, if you're just sitting in a park or a cafe, these conversations can also happen with local people, which is really nice, actually. I personally very like to communicate and interact with residents of the people that I'm visiting. So this also happened to me quite a lot. People just coming and engaging the conversation.
Exactly. And I like to tell people too that it is okay when people approach you like that, to not be too scared or close that conversation off. Like, of course, be aware and be smart about, where the conversation is going and the intention of the person. But for the most part, people are just genuinely curious and they want to learn and know more. And that's where people are coming from when they approach you. So be open to those experiences. Of course, trust that gut feeling in your stomach. If something feels off, follow that feeling. But generally, people are just very curious about what you're doing and why you're out there traveling.
Yes. So what should a woman do if she starts feeling uncomfortable? Like, as you were mentioning, that gut feeling. So if you're starting to feel uncomfortable or unsafe, either it being in a conversation with a stranger or in a group setting or whatever, in an activity, like, has it ever happened to you, or what can you do to like get yourself out of a maybe awkward situation?
I have had several times on the road where I have encountered situations where I'm like, if this isn't okay, I don't feel comfortable. How can I remove myself from this situation? And for the most part, continuing to be polite helps get you out of a situation. So it doesn't help if somebody is being offensive or rude, don't react rudely back to them. Be, as neutral or polite, depending on the situation, as you can to get out of it. And then the trick is to get out of that situation as soon as possible. If there are other people around you, try and engage them or let them know that you might be feeling uncomfortable. People are really aware of their surroundings. So other people will catch on that you might be feeling uncomfortable. And if it's a conversation that, has kind of turned inappropriate and you're trying to get out of it, just let people know that like you're meeting up with a friend and you have to go meet with them now, or a friend will be there soon. Don't ever tell them where you're going or what you're doing, but just be vague about the details, but let them know that there is somebody else involved. Even if you aren't meeting up with a friend, it just lets them know that somebody else, hey, they know where you are and what you're up to, whether it's true or not. And then I always stick with trying to be neutral or polite about it and removing myself from that situation. But it can be really complicated and it can be complex. But I also always, if I'm in a situation and perhaps, I'm in an area where a man is making me feel uncomfortable, I will look towards other women for help and assistance as well, because I think sometimes they can relate to maybe the situation that I'm going through. So I will look around, see who's around me, and I will usually approach other women first. And then, I'll look at who else might be in the near vicinity that can possibly help me in whatever situation it might be.
Yes, definitely rely on that women's solidarity and making eye contact. And I also try to do that even when I'm home. When I'm home or abroad, I try to be aware of my surroundings and look at other people to pick up those cues if I see people that are in an uncomfortable situation, so that I can go and help that person out of an uncomfortable situation or conversation. It's also good to not wait to be in that position of vulnerability, but also be that person for other people who might be.
Absolutely. And all what it takes is a, hey, are you okay? And then you can usually tell by the person's response what the situation might be, if they are or if they're not.
Yes, totally. Is there, are there things that solo travelers should avoid at all costs, or maybe be more aware of? Either it being tourist trap or situations. Are there like tips and things that come up to your mind that we should keep on our list of things to avoid?
So there's so many tourist traps out there, and they're different depending on the city and the country you're in, that you could make a laundry list of them and then never remember when you're actually encountering a tourist trap. So what I usually tell people is just being aware, and if something doesn't feel right, completely trust your gut about that feeling. There's a reason why you feel that way. And so following that feeling, I found, has helped lead me through some complicated or situations where you're just like, something's not right here. And again, it's kind of using those same skills to kind of remove yourself from the situation. If people are pressuring you, just stand your ground and say, no, thank you, I'm good, but thank you, being polite about it, not being rude. I find those things always help as well. But there are so many tourist traps out there that I would say the number one thing that you can do is just educate yourself before you go. So whether you're reading resources on the destination you're going to, or you're talking to people who have already been there, that is probably the biggest thing I recommend to people, is know the culture that you're stepping into, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, and then being aware of that and making sure to act appropriately. Even if it's different from how your culture does it, you need to abide by the laws and the rules and the expectations in the other culture, because you are the guest there. This isn't your home, you're in their home.
Definitely. And a little research will go a long way in making you feel more comfortable and making sure that you're dressed properly, because sometimes you're not necessarily going to be aware, because for you in your own culture, the way you're dressing is perfectly fine, but maybe in that time and place, it's absolutely inappropriate, and people will give you weird looks and glance at you, and this can make you feel uncomfortable. Maybe it's because it's not common for people in that area to, it's not common for women to be alone outside after dark, and you're not aware of it and you're doing it. So of course you're attracting a lot of undesired attention. So really researching your destination ahead it's the number one tip that we can give actually to travelers, either it being male or female. Anybody should research their destination.
Exactly. And I've had moments where I've recognized my own ignorance in a situation where I might be dressed inappropriately. And I believe in women being able to wear whatever makes them feel comfortable. But then you also need to be aware of how other people are reacting around you. And one big tip that I like to share is carry a scarf with you. It takes up a small amount of space in a bag or a purse or whatever it is you have. And then you can wrap your hair, you can wrap your shoulders. Maybe you're wearing shorts that day and you wanted to go into a temple, you can wrap it around your legs and act as a longer skirt. And if you're on a long bus tour and you've got a 30-hour bus ride and it's really cold, then you can use your scarf as a blanket too. But I find that to be one of the biggest travel accessories I keep in my bag is a scarf, for several different reasons.
Definitely. It is always very useful. On a slightly different topic, what do you recommend if a person starts feeling sick abroad? It's like being sick at home, it really sucks. Being sick abroad, it happens and it sucks even more. So what do you do? At what point should you ask for help? Or I don't know. I have so many instances and stories of me being sick abroad. I could talk about it for a very long time, but I'm curious to know what your opinion about it is.
I think one of the most important things is recognizing how sick you actually are, right? If you just have a headache, make sure you're carrying some Tylenol or Advil with you, keep it in your bag so you can self-medicate, hydrate yourself, and then maybe take a quieter day. But there are instances where you actually are quite ill and you need to decide whether you have to go to the hospital or not. And I always tell people, if you can't afford travel insurance, you can't afford to travel. That is my number one purchase I make sure I've done before I go on any trip, is buying travel insurance. So if you do get sick while you're on the road, you don't feel intimidated by some of the costs. If you're in the United States, for example, to go get medical care can run up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars depending what's wrong. So if you have that travel insurance, then it makes it just an easier step to going to get the medical care that you need. It's covered. You can call them beforehand and ask them, what hospital do I go to? Where do I go? How do I get there? And they can be your support. The travel medical insurance can help get you the that you need. But if it's not quite that serious, what I often tell people is if you're in a hotel, let the front staff or the front clerk know that you're not feeling well. They might be able to check in on you every couple hours. They might be able to bring you up, some hydration stuff. And sometimes you're so sick you can't actually even leave your dorm room or your hotel room. And so communicating it to the people around you, most people are generally really willing to help you. So just letting people know that you're not feeling good. And sometimes it's reaching out back at home too, to let your parents or let your family members know that, hey, I'm not feeling so well. Maybe check in on me a little bit more than you have, just to make sure I'm doing okay.
Yes, and another piece of advice: always carry an ID on you, whether you're sick or not. If you just go on a walking tour or whatever, always have an ID on you, because if something happens, if you suddenly fall ill, if you get hit by a car, no matter what happens, it's important that you have a card that can identify you, because there are always stories of travelers who just go, well, it doesn't happen often, but we've heard stories of people who did not have an ID on them, and then something happened and they go to the hospital and they don't know the hospital staff, the people you're traveling with. They don't necessarily know what your last name is, maybe they know your first name and what country you're from. They know what hostel you're staying at, but they don't have enough information about your medical background to help you and support you in case something happens. So always carry an ID, always carry your proof of insurance, because some places will not accept you into a hospital if you don't have that proof of insurance on you. And your travel insurance will also know if you have a specific condition, because you fill up a questionnaire before. So if you are unconscious and unable to tell that you have a specific condition, or if you have like an allergy to medicine or something like that, well, the hospital is going to be able to contact your insurance provider directly and get this information. So always carry an ID.
And actually, for a couple years when I was doing my 6-month trips, what I actually had it was a little bracelet that just sat around my wrist. It was probably about that thick. It was quite thin. And I think it's actually designed for runners and joggers when they go out running, because you don't always carry ID with you. But there was a little metal band plate that would be on there, and I had my first and last name, and I had some details. So I had my blood type, I don't have any known allergies, so it had like an NKA to list that I didn't have these allergies, and then I could put an emergency contact number on it as well. So I listed I was from Canada, and then I gave a phone number, so they knew that they could reach whoever that phone number was to, and that would get a hold of somebody who knew me. And it was a really discreet way of always having identification on you, because sometimes you forget your wallet or you left your ID behind, or, because you're leaving in a hurry. And so I just found having this little bracelet that was very discreet was the perfect way to always keep identification on me. So no matter what happened, somebody would know who I was and where I was from.
Yes, and it's a really good idea, actually, because usually medical providers will look for a bracelet, because some people have a medical alert bracelet with allergies and stuff like that. So they will look for it before doing any emergency care. So it's a really good trip, a really good tip. I've never done it, but I will for my next travel. Yeah. So speaking of tips, do you have any other tips or words of wisdom to encourage and empower women to embark on their first solo trip?
Yeah, so it's okay to be scared. That is appropriate. That's okay. And you probably should be a little bit, intimidated by it, because it's something new and something different, and embrace that feeling, because it's totally okay. But I think the biggest thing is that you push past it and you do it anyway. So even though I've been, I've traveled to more than 60 countries in all 7 continents, if I was to get on the plane tomorrow and go somewhere I've never been before, I promise you 100%, I'm going to feel a little bit scared too, because it's new and it's different, and that's totally okay. The important thing is that no matter what, you do it anyway. And I always like to say that those things that scare you a little bit, they're usually the ones that will change your life the most. So keep pushing past it, push outside of your comfort zone, and you'll come home in a couple weeks or a couple months and you'll have so many stories to tell, and you'll have grown and changed as a person as well. So push past that fear, because it's totally okay and normal to experience.
Yes. Thank you so much for that conversation. We will now move to the next section of the webinar. So we will kind of like sum up everything that we've discussed so far with a series of pro tips. If any of you, Ashlyn, Marie-Gil, have anything you want to add to it, I'm just going to go through the list, but please feel free to jump in and add anything about it. So before leaving home, as we said, the number one thing you can do is pick a destination where you will feel safe. That's how I started. That's how Ashlyn started. You choose a destination where you'll feel comfortable, either because the culture is similar or because you're familiar with the language, but this will really help you a lot. The choice of the destination is really important. Maybe you've always dreamt of going to Africa or Southeast Asia, but if it's your first solo trip and you maybe feel a little anxious about it, this might not be the best first destination. So you can even start by being a tourist in your own country or your own province and just go on a little weekend trip alone and then see how you feel about getting to know other people when you're alone, eating out alone at the restaurant. So start with a destination where you'll feel comfortable with it. Always make sure you have an emergency fund in your bank account. So this is really important because you never know what's going to happen. If you don't necessarily have a trip cancellation travel insurance, there might come a time where you want to come back home, either because you are just over this trip or because an emergency situation happens in your family and your plane ticket might not be refundable or exchangeable. So just knowing that you have that money in your bank account in case you need it is really going to help make you feel comfortable and make you feel in control of your trip. It can also help you, let's say you had already booked your hostel room a few days ahead, and then you show up to that place and you find out that this place doesn't make you feel comfortable, either because it's dirty, because there are bed bugs, because the people that are there are like kind of shady or whatever. Knowing that you have that extra money in your bank account once again, and that you're not like counting every penny, is also going to help you make you feel safe, because then you'll have that possibility of making that decision. Well, actually, I don't feel comfortable here. I already paid for it. Too bad, I'm going to lose that $50, but just go and rent another room somewhere else. So make sure that you have money with you for any situation that can happen. And as we discussed, buy a good travel insurance. It is vital, in my opinion. And we made on the Youth Travel Foundation website a travel guide about travel insurance, because it's the first time you buy one, you don't necessarily know what question to ask, what to look for. There are so many different types of coverage. So I recommend going on and reading that guide, because it's going to help you decide what's best for you, the minimum amount of coverage that you need, and stuff like that. And really know that even if you feel like you're healthy and being cautious, you never know what can happen. You just never know. So I absolutely agree. It's even written on in the guide. If you can't afford travel insurance, you can't afford to travel. And it's not that expensive. You just have to budget for it when you're planning your trip. So one of the first thing you should do when planning a trip is calling to get a quote, so you can budget it and make sure that it is part of your planned expenses.
And I also always try to really impress upon people the importance of reading through the entirety of that contract that you have for travel insurance. Because I have actually been on a trip where I have been covered by 3 different travel insurance plans. And that's because I like to do a lot of outdoor adventure activities. And some of them wouldn't cover anything involved with scuba diving. Some of them wouldn't cover anything to do in the air if you wanted to go bungee jumping or a hot air balloon ride. And so I have read through every single bullet in those contracts to make sure I know what I'm covered for and I know what I'm not. And it's important to make sure that it is covering the activities that you want to do. And if they want to be vague about that, get them to list out those activities, make them send it in an email. Emails can be legal contracts as well. You have proof that that's what they've told you to, but it is so important to not only buy the travel insurance, but make sure you actually understand it and know what kind and type of coverage you have, so you don't get caught in a situation where you don't have the coverage that you expected.
Yes, and also always be honest about everything. Be honest about any pre-existing pre-existing condition that you have, even if it's just, let's say, you had the flu last week. If they're going to ask you certain questions, you have to answer with honesty, and you also have to be honest about your destinations, because it can influence the price of your coverage. And if you happen during the trip to add a destination to your trip, like, oh, it was not planned, but I'm going to Cambodia, and call them and let them know, because they might be like, well, that was not part of the original contract, so you're not going to be covered for that. Or they can just say, okay, we're going to add it, and then you're going to be fine. So always be honest and tell them everything.
Yeah.
Also, before leaving home, ask around for contacts abroad. You never know. Ask your friends, ask your family. If you have a specific destination in mind, or if you don't know where you're going, you can just ask around. Maybe they have like a friend abroad or a family member, and it can be a good contact for picking you up at the airport or going out for a coffee, or maybe just like contacting that person before to ask questions like, hey, if you're wondering things about the local culture, or how to get around, how to get a metro pass and stuff like that. So you would be surprised how small the planet is and how easy it is to find contacts in other countries. So it's definitely worth asking around on your Facebook feed or in your friends and family. Always give your family a copy of your important document. So make a photocopy of your passport, of your ID, and give them like projected itinerary. Of course, things change. You never know. It's fun to be spontaneous, but at least so they can know ahead where you're planning on going and what area you're going to be when and where. And copies of your document, it can be super useful if you ever lose your passport, or if something happened and you disappear, you go missing, worst case scenario. Well, at least they will have this information with them to help in whatever way they can. And as we said, find out as much information as possible about your destination before you go. This is really going to help you, make you feel comfortable when you get there. It's not going to totally avoid the culture shock. It's impossible. You can prepare as much as you want. It's still going to be a surprise when you get there. But at least if you know ahead what the women condition is, if there are specific climate or weather events, like if you really love to go hiking, you should know ahead, is it an area where there can be flash floods or stuff like that. So this is the kind of thing that is important to know ahead, so that you don't involuntarily put yourself in a situation that could potentially be dangerous.
And along with giving your family copies of your important documents and itinerary, if you're traveling for a long time, you're going to be planning your itinerary as you go. And so I've just made it a habit. Every time I've booked a bus ticket or an airplane ticket, I just automatically forward that email to my mom. I don't have to give her an explanation, but she has some sort of an itinerary of where I'm expected to be. And I just don't even think about it now. I just immediately forward it on to her, and it's really simple.
Yes, and should there be an event like a plane crash or a bus or whatever, if your parents have the information about your flight or your bus trip, they will be able to look if you were in that bus and not contact you in panic, because this definitely happened to me. Oh my gosh, were you part of this? And I wasn't. So it can help. Also, it can help your family feel safe about your trip if they are not necessarily comfortable with you leaving.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one, bring UTI or yeast infection treatment, is not necessarily mandatory. I would say, first of all, it depends on you, your body, how sensitive you are or not. But know that when you travel abroad, depending on the destination, the body's pH can be a little messed with, and you can be a little more sensitive to getting an infection. That being said, if you're going to a country that is like super modern and where you speak the language, you don't need to bring these things in your first aid kit. But if you go to a place where the language barrier might be a little greater, or you are going to be in a remote area for several weeks or something like that, it might be worth bringing it, just so you don't find yourself in need. But once again, it really depends on the type of travel you're going to do and the destination. But know that it's the kind of thing that can be very useful in a first aid kit. as well as planning ahead all your hygiene. You don't necessarily know if the products you use here back home are going to be available in the country you're going to visit. So bring everything you need. I personally always bring at least a roll of toilet paper, because there are places where they don't use toilet paper, and there are also many countries where they use scented toilet paper, which I know doesn't suit me well at all. I'm very reactive, very sensitive, so no scented toilet paper for me. So I made it a point to always carry a roll with me. It doesn't take much space, and it makes me feel very comfortable.
And I always made a point of carrying tampons from Canada with me, because I knew what products I liked, and because I'm always out hiking or adventuring, and sometimes you just get on a bus and go because plans change. This way, if they were in my bag, I never had to ever worry about if I was going to get my period and how it was going to affect my trip. And I've often found too, when you are traveling, you're a little bit more stressed out, your time zones are changed, your period might not be the same as what it is at home, so you might get caught off guard by it. So I just always felt more comfortable carrying my own tampons from Canada and kept them in my bag, and it was worth the space, the small amount of space and weight that they took up in my bag to have them with me.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're using any contraceptive like the pill, bring everything you need for the whole duration of the trip, because you probably won't be able to get an extra pack abroad, because you need prescription for that, and prescription drugs are not the same everywhere. And if you are, speaking of which, traveling with prescription drugs, it's worth asking ahead if you need to bring the actual prescription with you. This is probably not true for a contraceptive, but there are other medications that could be legal here in Canada but illegal abroad, so always verify before going. And same thing with condoms, like they don't take much space. I'm not advocating for going crazy abroad, but you never know what's going to happen, and it can't hurt to have just one tucked in the corner of your backpack just in case. Better safe than sorry.
Another prescription I actually always carry with me as well. A lot of people don't think about it. I wear contact lenses and I wear glasses. And there are times maybe your bag does get stolen or you misplace something. Have either a photo of your eye prescription on your phone or in your email. So if you do need a second set of glasses or contact lenses, you can get them easily when you're traveling. Because I would be lost if I didn't have my glasses with me all the time.
Yes, it's such a good idea. And it's so easy to order glasses or contact online nowadays that definitely you can order them or just go to an eye doctor. And if you have your prescription, you're going to save a lot of money and a lot of time also. And always test out new clothing item before leaving home. So if you're buying a super quick dry synthetic fabric pair of underwear or a new pair of shoes or a new shirt, whatever item you're buying, even your backpack, I would say always test out your material before, because you never know how your body's going to react to it. Maybe the backpack is going to give you a little rash at a certain place and you're going to need to go back to the store to get it adjusted. Shoes, most of the time, highly uncomfortable for the first few days, and you don't want to spend the first few days of your trip with blisters on your feet or on your armpits because of your backpack. So same thing if you buy like a new lotion or sunscreen or whatever, I would say always try everything before to make sure that you react well to it.
Also, I just thought one thing I like to bring when I travel are little packs of electrolytes. So they don't take much space, and when you get dehydrated, sometimes, I don't know, you're caught up in an activity and you don't think of drinking as much as usual. So electrolytes have saved me from getting really, really bad. So they're my go-to now. I take them everywhere with me, so could be a nice thing to bring along.
Yes, that's a really good suggestion. And just speaking in terms of water, I usually end up, if I can drink out of a tap when I'm traveling, I do, just because it's more environmentally friendly, and I do carry my own water bottle. But I try to buy water bottles, but sometimes you don't always have access to fresh water. So I carry water purification tablets in my bag as well. They're super tiny. You can get a pack of a dozen in about that size. And if you need to, you can drop that into a 1 or 2 liter water bottle and have access to clean water as well. So that's a good small thing to have in your first aid kit.
Yes, definitely. It tastes awful, but it's really practical in case of an emergency. And you can add the electrolyte to it so that it covers the foreign taste.
Exactly.
Okay, so if you want to meet new people, talk to your hostel staff really well, or your hotel staff. You're not necessarily going to be in a hostel, but wherever you're going to be, if you rent an Airbnb, if you're in a hostel, in a hotel, camping, talk to the people that work there. It's their job. They know that usually they are residents, so they know the neighborhoods, they know what's happening, they might know of free events, and they might be able to put you in contact with other travelers that also are looking for partners to go on a hike or to do a tour or whatever. So they are great resources. You should not be shy with them. They're really there to help you. And usually hostels will organize free activities and free tours. So one of the first things you should do is ask, hey, what's happening this week? Sometimes there's a board that says all the activities, but if it doesn't, ask around. Maybe they know, and joining like a class, a tour, whatever, it's a great way to meet people. Even if it's not with the hostel, some cities will organize free walking tour. I love it. You get a lot of information about the place you're visiting. You get to meet people and interact. So sometimes it's just that little activity that will help you break the ice. If you go on a date with someone, if it's like a romantic date, or if it's just like a date with a traveler with the hostel, whatever, always try to meet people in public places at first. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you feel cornered or anything, and always share the info about your date. So you can tell your parents or a friend back home, hey, I'm going on a date tonight, so I'm meeting this person. Take a screenshot of their social media profile maybe, or just leave a note on your bed and leave it on your dorm bed, so that should something happen and you come back later, whatever, people will know the last place you were supposed to be. And there are many, many apps and websites that you can use to meet new people. If you don't necessarily feel comfortable just going and engaging a conversation with a person in a bar or whatever, you can use one of these websites or apps to actually meet people, like Bumble to meet friends, or Woofing to go and interact with locals. So don't be afraid to use them. If you want to stay safe, carrying a cell phone and buying a local SIM card is a great way to feel connected at any time, either it being able to contact your friends and family, or saving the emergency numbers and being able to contact quickly the local police or whatever. Always consume with moderation. It's fun to have a little drink or two, but obviously if you are wasted, you put yourself in a position of vulnerability. So I would say always err on the side of cautious. Transit during the day if possible. It's not always possible. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to take a night bus or a night flight, but if you can, traveling during the day will make you feel more comfortable. Arriving at your destination, arriving at your hotel or hostel during the day will definitely make you feel safer. And traveling during the day, personally, I find it fun because you can see the landscapes and everything. Some people carry a whistle or an alarm with them. I personally would not feel comfortable carrying an alarm because I'm super clumsy and I know that I would pull that little trigger by mistake and create a ruckus. But carrying a whistle can definitely be discreet and easy. Well, actually, I think there is a whistle on my backpack, like on the side, but you don't necessarily have to use it against abusers. Maybe if you go on a hike and you get lost, you can use it to help people find you. Or I've heard someone using it to scare away dogs or boars, or I don't remember what it was, but it was some kind of wild animal. So whistle is a little more discreet and safe than an alarm if you are clumsy.
And I always do tell people, if you're out and something is going wrong, sometimes calling help doesn't get people coming towards you to help because they might be worried about coming into the situation. So using different phrases or terms. So like if you yell out, hey, I don't know you, leave me alone, or you're making me uncomfortable, and even raising your voice or yelling these out. And I don't know if this one works necessarily, but I've also heard sometimes instead of calling help, you call fire, because more people are going to come out if there's a fire than if they know there's some trouble in the street, because they don't want to get themselves involved in the situation. So just being mindful of the words that you use if you do need to call out and get assistance as well.
Yes, good idea. Even back home.
Yeah, anywhere.
if you do find yourself a victim of a crime, well, it depends on the nature of the crime. If you get your stuff stolen, or if you are a victim of a physical abuse or whatever, the first thing to do is finding a safe space, a place where you can go and calm yourself, contact someone, definitely the first thing to do. Then the government website recommends to calling the consulate services first, because they might be able to direct you to the right person to contact. Maybe it's the police, maybe it's another organization. It depends the situation, it depends the nature of the crime. So calling the consulate service first, this is the general number. There will be a different service in each country, but this number can redirect you to the local service. And if you are a victim of a rape or physical abuse or whatever, if you decide to file a complaint, do not wash yourself or change up your clothes first, because you don't want to mess up with the evidence. Now, maybe you won't want to file and it's totally okay, it's up to you. But if you decide to, know that you don't want to tamper with the evidences. However, I would always recommend going to the hospital, because you don't know, you just want to make sure that you're fine physically, mentally, everything. So yes, finding a hospital. And once again, the consular service can help you find the nearest hospital, or the one that is the best equipped to help you deal with that.
And it's helpful if you do take an extra change of clothes with you and take the supplies that you need, so when you are at the hospital, you do have something more comfortable that you can change into afterwards as well.
Yes. So that's it for now. Marie-Gil, were there any questions, or do you have questions or comments, or would you like to add something based on your own travel experience?
Yeah, so we didn't receive any questions, but I do have some. So I'm a huge fan of solo travel for various reasons, but I'm curious, Ashlyn, what's your favorite part of traveling solo?
Meeting everybody else. Hands down. I always say it's not about the places you go, but the people you spend time with in those places. And whether it's a friend or family member from home that joins you on a solo trip while you're out there, or it's just meeting the locals or other travelers when you're out there, it is definitely the people who have made my trips for me.
Mm. And you, Marie-Gil, what is your favorite part about solo traveling?
I feel like you really learn to trust yourself. Like when you travel with someone, sometimes you depend a bit on like what they want to do, and just making decisions for your day or anything. But when you're alone, you have to decide for yourself, and you're really free to do what you want to do as well. So it pushes you to reflect on what you really want, and just push yourself to go for it as well, and go out of bed and do some activities.
Yes, it's definitely a great tool to boost your confidence and make you feel like a strong, capable person. Even no matter what the destination is, just knowing that you're able to just carry yourself, have your own agenda, and do whatever you want. It doesn't matter if you just decide to go to a different province in Canada, or if you decide to go to West Africa. Any little journey that you embark on is valuable, and is going to make you feel really proud of yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. And also, I always find myself in deep life reflections when I travel solo, just because you're so far away from home, or maybe not that far away, but you're not at home and you're not with anyone from home. So it just really puts you in a different context that makes you reflect on a different way of living. And so I really find it interesting.
And I found solo travel has really helped me become the person I am today. I've learned so much through it. And again, that confidence, that independence, pushing yourself outside those comfort zones, and knowing that, hey, I can go out there and I can do anything, because I've had these experiences traveling solo and had to overcome so many different challenges and complications that arise when you're on the road. And so I am the person I am today because of my travel experiences. It lets you be who you really want to be without worrying about anybody else around you and what they think of you.
Definitely. It gives you perspective on the person you are back home and the person you want to be, and helps you like lower that gap in between. And really, yes, it's true. It gives you perspective and confidence. Thank you for watching this webinar. Here are our websites, the Youth Travel Foundation, HI Hostels, and Ashlyn's blog. Do not hesitate to contact us if you have any questions, any comments about this session, or if you need more advice about planning your next trip or whatever. I'm sure all three of us would be very happy to help you. Thank you so much, girls, for being there today with your background and experience and answering all these questions.
Thank you so much. This is such a wonderful conversation to have.
Yes. And we really hope that we gave you more confidence and more tools to build your own adventure and just jump in. So thank you, everyone, and have fun in your travel. Just do it. Just do it.